Look closely. Do you see that marble in the grass? The tiny astronaut with one arm raised. The old-fashioned key in the gutter. Van sees them. Van notices all sorts of things, but usually no one notices Van. He's small, and he's always the new kid, easy to overlook. Then one day he watches a mysterious girl and a silver squirrel dive into a fountain to steal a coin. And, even more strange, they notice Van. Suddenly the world changes for Van. It becomes a place where wishes are real, a place where wishes can be collected just like his little treasures, a place where wishes can come true. But that's not always a good thing. Not all wishes are good, you see, and even good wishes can have unintended consequences. And Van is about to find out just how big those consequences can be. Here is a preview of The Collectors by Jacqueline West. The spider dangled above the table. It was a large table in a busy restaurant, but it was wedged into the dimmest corner, and the spider's web was strung between the curls of an old wrought iron chandelier that no one ever remembered to dust. A family sat at the table below. 3 grandparents, an aunt and uncle, a mother and father, and a child who was exactly 4 years old. The spider positioned herself above the child's chair. She waited there, watching, her eyes glittering like the bumps on a wet blackberry. When several waiters trooped into the corner, carrying a special little cake with 4 burning candles on top, the spider inched a bit farther down her thread. The waiters and the family all sang and cheered. "Make a wish," said one of the grandmothers. The child huffed out the candles. Everybody cheered again. And in that moment, while everybody was smiling and clapping and getting ready to slice the cake, something rose up into the air on a spinning wisp of candle smoke. The spider caught it. It was what she had been waiting for. She bundled it up into a ball of strong, gluey thread. Then she scuttled across the ceiling to the nearest window and wedged herself through the gap above the sill, dragging the bundle behind her. Outside, a gust of cool evening air swept over her, making her clutch the restaurant's brick wall with 6 legs. But she didn't lose her grip on the bundle. Once the gust had passed, she lowered it slowly, carefully, toward the sidewalk. A gray pigeon hopped down from its perch on a street sign. It glided below the restaurant window, snipped the spider's thread with its beak, and flapped away up the twilit street, the bundle dangling under it like a tiny, broken pendulum. The pigeon landed on the shoulder of a woman in a long black coat. The woman held up one hand. The pigeon dropped the bundle into it. The woman tucked the bundle safely into one of the coat's many pockets. Then the woman turned and strode off into the shadows, with the pigeon still perching on her shoulder, and the spider squeezed back through the window gap, and nobody noticed the small, strange, terribly important thing that had just happened. That's the thing about small things. They're very easy to miss. This makes small things dangerous. Germs, thumbtacks, spiders, both the black widows that lurk under rotting wood piles and the patient, watchful ones that live in the chandeliers of old Italian restaurants. Most of us don't spot them until it's too late. So it's a good thing for us that someone else, someone quiet and sharp-eyed and also very easy to miss, is always keeping watch. One summer afternoon, in the middle of a very large city, At the edge of a very large park sat one very small boy named Van. His full name was Giovanni Carlos Gauguez Garcia Markson, but nobody called him that. His mother, who'd given him all those names in the first place, called him Giovanni. Most people just called him Van, which he liked much better. And the kids at school called him Minivan, which he didn't. Van was always the smallest kid in class because his mother was an opera singer whose work took them all around the world. Van was always the newest kid, too, and he was generally the only kid with a tiny blue hearing aid behind each ear. He tended to like different games and watch different shows and read different books than everyone else. He was used to being on his own. In fact, he'd gotten very good at it. So on this particular afternoon, Van was sitting on his own on a wide stone bench. His mother was trying on shoes in a shop across the street, and every now and then she'd look up and check on him through the plate glass window. She'd warned him not to leave the bench. Van didn't mind. He was more interested in looking around than in getting up anyway. There was plenty to watch. People were picnicking in the shade, jogging on the pathways, playing fetch with their dogs on the soft green grass. Pigeons waddled everywhere. A man with a pink guitar sang a song whose words Van couldn't catch. And just a few feet away, a huge stone fountain splashed and shimmered, droplets of water falling from one bowl to the next like curtains of glass beads. A boy on a bicycle zoomed past the fountain, his tires flattening a strip of grass. And that was where Van saw it. A small red plastic arm stuck up from the crushed grass of the tire track. Its hand was open, and its palm was turned out, so it looked like it had an important question and was just waiting for someone to call on it. Van glanced over his shoulder. His mother was sitting in a shoe shop chair, her head bowed over a pair of high heels. The arm was still waiting. Van scooted his behind toward the edge of the bench. Then, with a last quick look at the shoe shop, he slid off the bench and dashed across the grass. He crouched beside the red plastic arm. The rest of its body, if there was a rest, was buried in the dirt. Van took hold of the arm and gave a tug, and a small red man popped out of the ground. The man had a red plastic spacesuit and bendable red plastic arms and legs, and a helmet that looked like a bubble of fossilized chewing gum. Van crumbled a bit of dirt off the man's shoulder. Then he put him in his jacket pocket and took a careful look at the grass all around. Perhaps a red plastic spaceship had crash-landed somewhere nearby. Something glimmering in the mulch turned out to be a big blue glass marble with a glittery gold swirl inside. Van rolled the marble back and forth on his palm, watching it sparkle in the spring sun. He dropped it into his pocket. To the spaceman, the marble could be a distant planet or a meteorite full of some powerful and unearthly element. Van was trying to decide what sort of element it should be when he spotted something else gleaming on the pavement just ahead. A bristly man in a windbreaker noticed the gleaming thing at the same time. The man bent to pick it up. Then he turned toward the fountain and gave the gleaming thing a flip off the tip of his thumb. Van watched the coin arc through the air. It spun toward the largest bowl of the fountain, where it hit the water with a soft, splooshing plop. To Van's ears, there wasn't really any sound at all, but his mind filled in what he would have heard if he had been several feet closer. The man turned around again. He noticed Van watching him and gave a bristly half smile. "No army, is she, right?" Army thought he heard the man say over the noise of the park, "No harm in wishing, right?" The man tucked his hands into his pockets and shuffled away. The next instant there was a wild shiver in the bushes to Van's left. Van turned. A squirrel! A pale, almost silver, very bushy-tailed squirrel shot out of the leaves as if it had been fired from a grenade launcher. It bounded onto the edge of the fountain, swishing its tail and chittering excitedly. An instant later, someone else burst out of the bushes. This something was a person, a youngish, girlish person with brown hair tied back in a ponytail and a long dark green coat that had clearly been made for someone much bigger. The girl bolted to the spot where the squirrel stood. Without even stopping to push up her floppy coat sleeves, she plunged face first over the lip of the fountain. Van generally liked talking to adults more than he liked talking to other kids. Adults didn't call him Minivan. Adults didn't think that tweed vests or cashmere cardigans were hilarious things to wear. As far as Van could remember, no adults had ever flicked anything that had come out of their noses at him. But there was something about this girl, with her weird coat and sloppy ponytail, that drew him closer. He inched forward. The girl sprawled on her stomach over the fountain's side, with the squirrel crouched beside her. Van stopped just out of range of the girl's kicking legs. From there, he could see that she was pawing at the scummy bottom of the fountain, scooping together a mound of even scummier pennies. Van's voice, like the rest of him, was small. He said politely, "You probably shouldn't do that." The girl shot up as though Van had screamed, "Look out, rabid badgers!" straight into her ear. She whirled around, her ponytail splattering Van and the squirrel with a gush of fountain water. She gasped so loudly that Van gasped too. The squirrel shook its wet fur. "I'm sorry." Van threw up his hands. "I didn't mean to startle you, but—" "What?" shouted the girl. "I said I didn't mean to startle you," Van repeated, slowly and clearly. Now that the girl was staring at him, he noticed that the rest of her features were small and round, but her ears and her eyes were large. He wasn't sure about the expression in those eyes, but if he'd had to guess, he might have called it fear. The girl reached out one cold, wet finger and touched the center of Van's forehead. She gave a little shove. Van wobbled. "You're real," the girl breathed. Van's hearing aids made voices louder, but they made everything else louder too. In big cities, even in peaceful spots like parks, they filled his head with several sounds at once: motors, echoes, horns, tires, chirping birds, splooshing fountains. Still, Van was close enough to the girl, and her voice was clear enough that he was pretty sure he'd heard right, even if what he'd heard didn't make sense. Maybe this girl was one of the crazy people his mother said lived in the park. Van took a cautious step backward. "Yes, I'm real," he said, "but you—" "Who are you with?" The girl cut him off in a quick, sharp voice. "Why are you talking to me? You can't stop me, you know. If you're working for them, you're too late. It's mine." And this has been a look at The Collectors by Jacqueline West.